And I was a screenwriter, and I used to say, well, you know what the most important thing in a screenplay is the first 10 minutes. You got to hook them.
Yep.
And get something that makes them go, oh my gosh, I care.
Welcome to the broadcast. This is Michael Easley inContext, and too bad you couldn't see what Pat Lencioni and I have been talking about for the past 15 minutes that we're not going to ever show you because we'd both be in trouble. Pat Lencioni is an author. If you've been around the business world, he is a household name. He's written 13 books. Nearing 9 million copies have been sold of his publications. They're translated in 30 plus languages. If you're in a leadership capacity, undoubtedly you know Pat Lencioni's writing. I think I got your The 5 Temptations of the CEO book probably when it first came out. I had all the slipcase books. You know, I had all of them from day one, and of course, everywhere I went, we made everybody read them all.
You know that first book? I didn't know well enough to know. It was my first book, so I had no juice at the publisher. But I said, no, I want to cover it. I want to design the cover.
Wow.
And we went, it was a New York publisher, Wiley, or they were called something else. And I went to the bookstore, and I went to the religious section, and I found missals.
Okay.
And I said, I want it to be simple. I want it to be the kind of book that is just so stark. And they had all these complicated.
Yeah.
And I just said, do this. And then later on, as they started to grow, we changed it just a little. But the first one, it looked like something you'd pick out of the back of the pew.
Good for you. Well, you know, my daughter's had a couple books published. I've had a couple. And that fight for the title and the cover, it's like, why even, anyway.
I didn't know I wasn't supposed to do that. They just left us alone after that.
Well, after the sales, I'm sure. 4 Obsessions of an Extraordinary Executive, a leadership fable, and I want to ask you about why fables. 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, Getting Naked, a business fable about shedding 3 fears that sabotage client loyalty. I won't read all of them. Silos, Politics and Turf Wars, we have to talk about that one. 3 Signs of a Miserable Job, why not? And then your newest book, 6 Types of Working Geniuses. So why the fable?
You know, the truth of the matter is that I grew up loving writing. And you remember this, John Boy Walton, remember the Waltons?
Sure.
And he was a writer. And I was just like, I think that guy's kind of cool. And I think I want to be a writer. And because he'd write at the end of his journal. And so, but I came from a pretty poor family, not college educated. And there was no way I was going to be a writer. So I went to college and I studied economics. But I took a few screenwriting class. I took a screenwriting class and a journalism class. Loved it.
Wow.
So I started writing screenplays in my spare time. And there were some people that had a little interest, but I said, okay, I'm not doing that. But I love to write. So when I first came up with my leadership theory, which was the 5 Temptations of a CEO, somebody said, you should write a book. And I was like, I don't know if I have time. And they go, well, somebody else will, because this is really good. And I said, okay, I will. And I sat down to write it, and I got depressed thinking about all the business books I've bought that I never finished.
Mm.
And I was so sad for people who put all this time to write a book that nobody read the back. And they read the first couple. And I said, you know, why don't I just do that thing I've done in my whole life, which is write fiction, screenplays. And I wrote them like, it's written like a screenplay. There's not a lot of details. It's like plot. And so I just decided I want to make people get to the end. And I want it to be short. And so I just wrote that way. And we did not know it would ever get published. It was an accident. We started our company, and I said, let's go to Kinko's and make copies of this. We'll give it to our clients. And then a publisher accidentally saw it by the grace of God and then went from there. So I love doing that. Then I wrote my only nonfiction book called The Advantage, which is like a textbook, right? With all of our stuff. And people said, no, man, write the fiction. I had so many women come up to me and say, my husband hasn't read a book since college, but he reads all of yours. And I think they want something that keeps them going. They lose themselves in the fiction and the characters, and then they're learning things about themselves that I'm not preaching at them. They're looking at characters and going, oh, crap, I do that. Mm-hmm. So anyway, so fiction since then.
You know, I haven't thought about it now. It's interesting because I read a lot of academic, esoteric type things, and I have to underline constantly and write in the margin because the older I get, it takes longer to retain things.
Yeah.
And I really want to understand where the author's going.
And rewriting something helps.
Totally. I'm big on neuroplasticity, but if I read a fable or whatever, you're exactly right. I'm burning through it. You know, I read to my grandkids, and it's fascinating how you have to read to a child with intonation and drama. You can't just read it the way, you know.
Yeah.
We learn differently, don't we?
Absolutely.
I was thinking, kind of going over the corpus of your literature. We come out of the Depression. We go into World War II. Companies, businesses, I mean, is it fair to say a benevolent dictator was sort of the formula for leadership post-Depression?
Yeah, and interestingly enough, there were actually more of those than we think because there was values.
Yep.
And so they were like that person, but they were like, they cared.
When Brokaw wrote his book, The Greatest Generation, extraordinary read, but if I remember correctly, sacrifice, the country asked me to serve, don't talk about yourself. That was the thesis of all those people.
And if you're going to have a dictator, have one of those.
Exactly.
And so people were like, yeah, I can trust this.
Yep.
And there wasn't a lot of participation in leadership, and it actually did work.
So unions, of course, have existed before this, but enter the union, enter mistreatment of employees. There was a time unions were important, right?
Well, yeah, and when you have a coal mine and nobody has a choice, that's a recipe for abuse.
So when did we start seeing this model really become us versus them with leadership and employee?
Well, it's an interesting, and I love that you're asking this, and I don't know the answer, but I can tell you this. So I grew up in a time where my dad said if it were fun, they wouldn't call it a work.
Wow.
And he would come home from work when I was a kid, and I noticed he would be a little bit grumpy, just a little, and I didn't know what he did exactly. I kind of did, and he would talk about management. And I was like, I don't know what it is, but it makes him grumpy.
I don't want to be.
And I don't want him to feel that way. And I don't want to feel that way. And then I got my first job, and things were changing. The kids were being helicopter parented a little bit. Not me. But there was this new, and in fact, this was pre-helicopter parenting, but it was the age of we should probably care what they think.
Huh.
And there's very healthy. And then the workplace was I was like, people shouldn't be miserable. And I read a few authors like Tom Peters and Stephen Covey. I didn't actually read them because I was a kid. I think I saw them on like TV. And I thought, I don't know what they're talking about exactly, but that's interesting to me. Mm-hmm. So I go to college. I go to Claremont McKenna. There was this guy named Peter Drucker that teaches at the graduate school. I don't know what the hell organizational dynamics is. I have no idea what's going on. I get out of school. I get a job at Bain. I'm a management consultant where they just crushed us. I mean, it was like the worst place to work, but it was you're going to get rich.
Right.
But really, they were pitting us all against each other. We were working 75 hours a week.
Brutal.
This was the end of that era, and I was just like, this is not good.
What you want to do, yeah.
And I saw in our clients that there was politics and dysfunction, and we weren't addressing it. And I literally came out of a meeting once and said, I want to help them figure out why they don't like each other and why they don't work together. I don't really care what their cost structure is. I don't really care about their strategy. It's interesting, but until we fix the human part of this is not making a difference.
You familiar with the book Leadership and Self-Deception?
Yeah.
I remember reading that one, and if I remember correctly, Pat, they never give attribution to an author.
I love that.
Yeah.
There's one of my other favorite books is that way too. And I've met the author of the other book, and he said, I just wanted it to be for the institution.
Right. And I remember the first time I read it, and it just struck me, it's kind of like The Tale of Three Kings. If you read that book, you get hit at the end. He's talking about you the whole time, boom. And he uses it's also a fable-esque type thing, but he uses the analogy of, the boss comes in the room, and, Michael over there, Michael doesn't like the boss, and the boss doesn't like Michael. Everybody knows it. And they have this weird sense of humor between the two of them, and they say some comments that are kind of ha, ha, ha. And he goes on to develop, you'll never manage or lead beyond that one issue. And
exactly. And people want to go, yeah, but that's silly. That's so simple.
Exactly. And it's not.
I always talk about what I do is I deal with what we call organizational health. And it stands in contrast to organizational intelligence. Not that you need both. But every business school, when I worked at Bain, was all about intelligence. And it's like marketing, strategy, operations, finance, technology, and all of that's important, but you can learn about that stuff.
Yeah.
If you're dysfunctional, if people aren't like honest with each other, trust each other, argue well, hold each other accountable, if they're not clear about what they're trying to do, this is rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic. And the story I like to tell is when Ricky comes home from work in I Love Lucy, and he finds Lucy crawling around, spying on him and his friends, and he says, "What are you doing?" And she says, "I'm looking for my earrings." And he says, "You lost your earrings out here in the living room?" And she goes, "No, I lost them in the bedroom, but the light out here is much better." And all these executives I was working with knew that the problem was they didn't like each other. It was like horrible. And they're like, "But that's messy. Let's just look at the spreadsheet." And it was like, "You're not going to find what you want there." And so I said, I want to help people look where they need to look. They can always get smarter. But if they're dysfunctional and unhealthy, nothing else matters.
Can you really affect that level of a change?
Yes. Can you measure it? No. When people say, "Well, exactly what kind of ROI am I going to get from this?"
No, setting that aside, just to, I used to have this notion, and it was simplistic and naive. You can only lead as well as you can relate. That I had to be able to relate to my staff, the people that worked around me. MBWA, I did that before I knew you were supposed to do it.
Yeah, I know.
It was like you care about people.
That they put it into an acronym is silly. It's like, oh, really?
Yeah. But to me, that was, as a leader, you love your people. Their gifting is different. There's people that are come early, stay late. There's people that are looking at the clock. And you tend to gravitate towards the ones that will work and help and have the right attitude. And when you have, lots of employees, even if the structure is tiered well, where your reports aren't too many, there's always one, it seems, or more.
Yeah. So the original question was, can you affect that?
Can you see the change, or do you fire them and say find another place?
Well, here's the thing: you start at the top, and this may be one of the most simple and powerful things I ever realized, and that I could ever tell somebody. And it's like this: when you have an employee, and I don't care if it's a CEO and on their executive team or in church and anywhere else, and they're not living according to the way you need them to. Hopefully you've stated that, their stated values or expectations. But what we tend to do is make it a decision science. Should I fire them or should I not? We love decision science. That's what business school teaches. Implementation science is far more important. And what I tell the CEOs, and they always do it, and I've learned this too, it's like, you need to go to that person and tell them that their behavior isn't lining up with what you want. Most CEOs, I hate
They don't want to do it.
No. But they'll go right to their wife and tell them when they go home, or their husband, and they'll go right to one of the other people and vent about them. It's one of those things like, and that's just not love. If you love them, you'll go right to them and say, "You need to change this." And then when they don't change it, you know what you need to do? Go back to them and say, "You need to change this." And when they don't do that, you need to go back to them and you need to go, "You need to change this." And when you do that, they're going to do one of three things. One of three things will happen. They will go, "Oh my gosh, he's not going to stop reminding me I need to change." Or, "Oh my gosh, he's not going to stop reminding me I need to go someplace else where I don't do that." Very rarely are they going to go, "I'm not going to change and I'm not going to leave." Nobody wants to do that. But when they do that, then you have to get HR and a lawyer and you got to let them go. But the problem is that the incidence of that happens so much more only because we don't say to them, "You're still not doing it. You're still not doing it. You're still not doing it." We would have to fire far less people and have all that ugliness if we just let them know there's nowhere to run and nowhere to hide. I'm going to lovingly remind you every time I see you not do this. And what do you want to do? You want to change, or do you want to go someplace else that'll be better for you? It's the lack of courage and love of leaders that puts us in a position to have to fire people and lead them surprised and wanting to sue and all that other stuff. Just tell them. And I'm sure that's biblical. But so many times we lack the courage and we make excuses like, "Oh, I shouldn't have to tell them. Oh, I'm so busy. I mean, I've talked to CEOs. So did you tell that guy that he's driving you crazy? He should know." It's like, you're making excuses. So anyway, it's the simplest thing. Tell people that they need to change and keep reminding them, and the problem will get resolved.
So back to my earlier thesis premise from World War II, depression, benevolent dictators, somewhere along there, the work of the individual rights, whatever, says, wait a minute, I'm not being treated fairly, this is wrong, we could be more efficient, all the above. And what you have seen over 30 plus years, what's been the most tectonic change you've watched? Because today leadership, you're on pins and needles, you've got HR issues that are so fragile. You've got DEI, you got gender debates. I mean, it's a Wild West, Pat. And it seemed there was. I mean, I don't want to be nostalgic, but there seemed to be a time when I respected the boss.
Yeah.
And if I didn't, I could go to him and say, hey, boss, you thought about this? You're the boss, but, and those days are gone.
Well, it's interesting. I think they're gone not because of the work environment, because of the culture that we live in.
Okay.
And I think that and you'll love this because you're an intellectual guy. I'm always, sentimentality is one of the worst things we have in our society today. Most people don't know what that means, but that means if it feels like the right thing and it makes people feel good, then it's good. And we are swimming in the destruction that brings about. What I mean by that is this. It is not love to tell somebody, oh, you're doing a great job if they're not. It's not love to affirm somebody in something that's destructive. And we can look at this from a moral standpoint. We can look at it at work. We can look at it at our friends. But our society today says affirming people is what's best. And in an environment, think about it in a work environment where it's like, and everybody has an excuse for like, well, this is why you should affirm me. And it's like, no, actually, me holding you accountable and you feeling like there's going to be consequences of that accountability is really good for you. And people go, you can't do that. And this is so prevalent in churches, but it exists in so many companies, especially companies without a strong culture and without strong leaders. Everybody's trying to avoid being seen as mean.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, and I tell people in churches, it's like they think that Jesus said, be nice to your neighbor as yourself.
I remember evaluating some guys on church staff some years ago, and they went to their other reports and complained that I was mean to them.
That's the trump card.
We had three things, Pat. There were three things you're doing well at, three things you need to work on. And I had them write it. And then we'd sit down and talk about it. And I go, so what are you doing about these things? And then if there was something else going on, I didn't like doing it, but I knew it was part of my role. And I'd say, man, we need to work on this. Or when you did this was the impact on the culture. And then I would back channel, and they would say, you're mean. People are afraid of you. They're intimidated by you. Yeah. I go, well, you never come to work. You're never in your office. Is it my job to say, hey, you need to come to work?
Yeah. And
the culture was not welcoming.
Yeah. Mean is the church one. In an organization, people say, you're micromanaging me.
Oh, micromanage, okay.
And that's like, whoa, everybody backs off. It's like, and I tell people, oh, I wish more CEOs would micromanage. Now, true micromanagement is terrible.
Right.
But I see so many problems with macromanagement where they go, I don't know what they're working on, and I don't tell them anything. Then they fire them because they never bother to say, hey, show me what you're doing and how you're going about that. So when an employee does not want to be held accountable, they say, oh, you're micromanaging me. And leaders have to go, no, I need to know you're doing the right thing so I don't surprise you if I have to fire you later. And I want to coach you up. So I think micromanagement is the equivalent of in companies what they say in churches, like you're being mean. Yeah. You mean I'm not approving of you?
Hurt your feelings.
You mean I'm frustrated at you because what you're doing is not allowing people to come to know Jesus better? Yeah, that's called righteous frustration and holy discontent. And that might not make you feel comfortable, but it's done in love and it's actually good because, and I love these things like in the Bible, discipline is love. And, even spoil the rod came from that. But the point is you hold people accountable. And if they're uncomfortable with that, they will probably grow. And if they choose not to grow, then they should probably make themselves available to the market.
I had a pastor that I worked with in Northern Virginia, D.C., and he was 10 years older than me. He'd been at the church a little longer than I had. And he would come to me occasionally and close the door. And he'd say, Michael, either stop saying this or start doing that.
Oh, because there was a lack of consistency.
And I loved him for it.
Exactly.
Now the poor
Did you
guy,
love him in that very moment?
Oh, yes. I mean, I'm like, you're killing me, but you're right.
Right.
And, he became my confidant.
Oh.
I would ask him anytime I had a conflict with a staff person or, someone in the church or an elder, I'd say, Ralph, help me out here, man. What am I doing wrong? And he didn't love doing it, but he loved me enough to do it.
That's the thing. Yeah. Nobody likes it.
No, he didn't. He wouldn't sleep for days.
But you choose love. And that leadership is sacrificial.
Yep.
And so many leaders. So one book you didn't mention I wrote because it came out the day before COVID happened. It's called The Motive. And it's about why you should or shouldn't be a leader. And if you go into leadership with the motive of this is going to be good for me, that the personal economics, I don't mean finances, economics are good, you're going to be a bad leader because you're going to go, why should I have an uncomfortable conversation? Why should I grind over, why should I lose sleep over a person's well-being? Because you are, Jesus, sacrificing. Leadership is, and when people say Jesus is the world's greatest leader, it's like, well, he's God's son, so let's not reduce him to that. But the essence of leadership is I will suffer for you. And when a leader goes into leadership and doesn't understand that, it's like a parent having children and going, this is not supposed to be hard for me.
But most leaders think it's about them, that they have been anointed or hired to make the company successful, and it stems or falls in their pay and their compensation and their benefits.
And that's why this book was one of my most recent books. The Motive should have been my first one. Because when people go, what should I do to be a leader? The first question I should ask is, well, first of all, why do you want to be a leader? And if they don't say, because I feel that I'm called to help others, and I'm the last one to get to, I need to take care of myself, but I am going to suffer more than others. Yeah. If they don't think that's true, then I'm like, oh, please don't.
You think of the number of Christian ministries where the founder didn't take a salary for years, but he paid his staff.
Oh.
Those people, the mission, the picture, whatever, was bigger than just their role. And it's a different culture, isn't it?
My career development and my trajectory, I think, was based on my willingness to tell people things that other people wouldn't tell them, but in love. And I called it the kind truth. And of course, I love this. Truth and grace go together. Without either, it's cruelty. But the CEOs of these companies, and this is when I worked at them, and then later when I was as a consultant, I would go into the CEO's office and be able to say, hey, I need to tell you something. But first of all, just know, I couldn't do your job, and I'm not saying I could. I'm not telling you that you're failing, but I see something that I need to tell you that might be hard to hear, but I think will be in your best interest. I did that all the time. People in companies that work directly for a CEO would pull me in, and I wasn't one of his direct reports, say, you go tell him.
Yeah.
And I would go, and I would tell them, and every time they would go, thanks, this is great. Hey, come back. I think that they would go like, I want to hear more from you. Because everybody else was choosing this either or between being a brown noser and like, hey, boss, you're the greatest, or the activist, which is your last step out the door, which is like, you're a jerk. And I remember looking at these people and saying, they're just older children. They're children of God. They make mistakes. I'm going to tell him in a way that allows him to feel whole, but doesn't deprive him of hearing something hard. I think it's the recipe for a relationship, for helping, and so many young people need to understand that.
Well, and that was my friend Ralph, that he would always add that. He'd say, Michael, I'll go with you. I'll help you.
That's awesome.
And whenever I had a problem, he was the one rolling up his sleeves. Let's go do it. And what a blessing, and then you try to, as a leader, maybe this was wrong, but I would magnify that behavior. I would say, Ralph called me and we did this, and I want to thank him for his initiative because this went by, and that can either polarize. People can, he's kissing up, or they can say, oh, that's what is important.
I think if a person is secure, and in a moment they might not be, but I think if they'll realize, no, this is good.
It's good.
The other thing is when you can tell people, hey, I made this mistake
100 times.
They're going to be like, oh, okay, so you're not saying you're better than me. That's the other thing. It's like, I even have to tell the CEOs, I'm not saying I'm better than you. Because it's like, otherwise, who are you? Why do you come in here and criticize me and say, hey, man, I couldn't do this? But you probably would like to hear this. And so.
You mentioned Drucker earlier, and you've got a book on meetings. Peter Drucker said you can meet or you can work.
Yeah.
A lot of companies have gone to this 20-minute stand-up thing.
Yeah.
Where you bring up coffee, but you're not eating donuts or sitting down. But I'm also thinking the meetings I've had, you couldn't get much done in 20 minutes.
Right.
So where are we on this whole meeting thing? And
I like that I actually have a very specific answer. You know what I mean? Because I wrote a book called Death by Meeting.
Right.
And you know something? Churches, that book, I'll meet a minister or a priest, and they'll go, you know what book I really love? And it's like more than often than not, Death by Meeting. And what I remember sitting in a room at this company, I won't say the name of it, but I was sitting in the room in a meeting, and they were all just bored. And I was sitting there bored, and I was observing the CEO and the team because I was consulting to them. And I remember that day going, I should write a book about meetings because everybody hates them. And yet everybody has them. And I remember sitting there that day watching this meeting. And by the grace of God, I started to realize a couple of things. And there were two problems with meetings. One was they're just boring. And anything that's boring is not good. Tell me anything like, hey, this is boring, and you're going to love it. And yet, people just accepted that. And I was a screenwriter, and I used to say, well, you know what the most important thing in a screenplay is the first 10 minutes. You got to hook them.
Yep.
And get something that makes them go, oh my gosh, I care. So that's one of the problems. But the other problem with meetings was what I called, they were meeting stew. And the way I described it was, meeting stew was like throwing every ingredient from the cupboard into one dish and stirring it together and wondering why it tastes so bad. Because I would sit in the meetings, I go, wait, are they voting on this? Are they just discussing it? Are they brainstorming? Are they just filling people in? Is this administrative? Is this developmental? And the answer was yes. And at the end of the meeting, everybody was equally disappointed because it was really none of those things. So what I came to the conclusion of, and I would always have to preface this with, bad meetings are bad. But good meetings are where you get things done, but you have to know why you're there. And so I would tell the CEOs and teams, I would say, instead of having this one crappy meeting, and everybody agrees it's crappy, even the CEOs, like, I know I'm in charge and it's crappy, you need to have 4 different meetings. And you're going to love every one of them, but you're going to be so clear about why you're there. And one is the stand-up meeting, and it's 5 minutes, and you're going to do it once a day, and you're going to stand there and go, what's going on today? What are you doing? What are you doing? What are you doing? Oh yeah, tell this. Okay, good, we're out. You're going to save yourself so many emails and voicemails just by coming together and doing that. The second meeting is once a week. You're going to get together. And I didn't really care if it was once a week or 2 weeks, depending. And you're just going to solve short-term problems. It's going to be tactical. You're going to say, what are the results? Where are we short? What's going on? What can we solve in the next 90 minutes and get this done? The third meeting is the most fun one. And we try to do it during those weekly meetings. We call it the strategic ad hoc meeting. It's like some big hairy issue comes up. And it's like, oh wow, this is why I came into business. This is why I'm in ministry. I want to solve that. And yet we try to do it in 10 or 15 minute increments in between going over tactical things. And everybody's frustrated. I said, so go have a different meeting, roll up your sleeves, grab pizza and a beer and a whiteboard and say, we're going to be here for the next 2 hours and we're going to argue, we're going to brainstorm. We might even do some research ahead of time. This is going to be fun. That's a business school case study, which we never allow ourselves to have.
Interesting.
Separate that out from the tactical. Mm-hmm. The fourth one is once a quarter. It seems like it was once a quarter. It seems like God designed the seasons this way, to step back and say, how are things going? Just breathe. You cannot. Doing all those at once, it was like this. My wife and I used to say, here's our meeting, Stu. We're in the kitchen. I mean, not the kitchen, the bathroom. And we're brushing our teeth, right? She has a sink, I have a sink. And I'm like, so honey, who's picking the kids up from school? Should we have another baby? Where should we go on vacation? What's for dinner? And the next day I come home and she goes, I'm pregnant. And I'm like, I thought we were having chicken. And we do this. And at home we do it. And we're like, well, were we deciding? And people would listen to that and go, oh yeah, I do that every day with my wife or my husband. We do it here too. We got to start separating these conversations, creating context. And once you do that, and then you realize, don't make them boring, like hook people. Suddenly people were saying that meetings is actually where they were getting things done and solving problems, which is what Drucker wanted us to do. They were not these corporate penance, which was like
corporate penance,
2
corporate
hours.
Purgatory.
Right, every day.
What do you do with the verbal processor versus the silent one in the meeting?
That's such a great question. First, you got to know who they are. And you've got to put it out there so that you can say, hey, you're doing that thing where you talk all the time. She hasn't spoken. And you always have something good to say when we ask you, but you don't necessarily offer it. So
that takes a high EQ for the person leading that meeting.
Absolutely. And so that's why when we worked with leadership teams, we would profile them right at the beginning. We would teach them how to laugh about, so that guy that was the wild extrovert would go, I know I talk all the time. And once he puts that out there, now in love, you can go, hey, you're doing that thing.
Yeah.
But if you ask the leader to do that without any context, without any trust, oh my gosh, nobody wants to do that.
Yeah.
So we would start every session, 2-day offsite with our leadership team, with the leadership teams, and say, we're going to figure out, are you an introvert or an extrovert? Do you think about details or big picture naturally? Are you more emotional or logical? And do you like structure or unstructured? And we would get them to understand it enough, And doing that allowed us, then when we go solve strategic problems, they would actually incorporate that and go, hey, you might be thinking about this in the short term. And they go, yeah, I know, I always think about the practical thing. Or, hey, you're looking up here, but we got to solve a real near-term problem. And they were actually coaching one another, loving one another, and interacting one another without feeling like they were judging each other.
When the Northern Virginia environment, it was very military, bureaucratic. I mean, the shadow of the Beltway, so everything's policy, these big manuals, policies, and procedures. And the MO there was contingency.
Right.
Contingency. So you could work on something for 18 months, and you had to and I used to joke and say, okay, for whatever program it was, I'm sure we missed some contingencies. Do we need a contingency for the unexpected contingencies? Because it was, but it worked in that environment, Pat, because that's how those people worked in their structure.
And I would say,
drove me nuts, but
when I would probably say, and then they need a different meeting where they go, contingency be darned.
Yeah.
Can we go and talk about things? And people would go like, but that might not work. It's like, I know.
Well, when 9/11 hit, you didn't have time for contingency.
Well, that's
you had to act.
And organizations that were all about that struggle.
Yep.
And you don't want to be susceptible to that. Now, you do have a culture, but
yep.
Even a really disciplined culture needs to lean into occasionally having undisciplined meetings, and they might be a little uncomfortable, but say, we have to do this.
It was fun, and I know you've had 1,000 of these experiences when something disruptive occurs and the team comes together to fix it. If it's an outside thing or a problem in the church world, when there was a hurricane or some devastation, there was a heart in that pastoral team. How do we help? And boy, they would come together. See,
and this is the premise of the book, Silos, Politics, and Turf Wars. It's not about breaking down the things. It's about giving everybody a common rallying cry. And an emergency provides a rallying cry that brings people together. The problem is, and in the military, they talk about the war is over, and now we go back and argue about nuts and bolts and costs. And in a church, when there's that compelling rallying cry goes away, then this ministry goes and says, we're fixing it. No. The children's ministry works with the liturgy team and works with the outreach team because of this. And then that compelling. So I always say to leaders, always have a compelling thing. And it's not a false emergency. That's not it. It's about what's the thing that we all need to share so that we don't look at our navel.
And, I don't do any consulting like you do. I've done a little bit with churches, but I often find the ingrown nature of a church and the bickering of silos and budgets. And I go, the problem is you guys aren't focused on your neighbor. You guys aren't focused on discipleship.
Right.
If you would get out of the house, so to speak, and say, why don't you have 3 neighbors over for dinner once a month for the next 4 months and just pray about asking them where they are spiritually? And then come back and tell us the story. Why don't you write 5 names on a 3x5 card about people you know that don't know Christ and just start praying for them. Just don't do anything else, get them out.
That's so crazy. I love this. Father John Ricardo was this amazing priest. You would love him. He was the guy that brought Alpha into the Catholic Church in North America, and he works with Nikki and all those things. He went to his parish in Michigan and said, we are shutting down every ministry. And people were like, well, I've been doing this. You know how that is. This is my ministry. And he's like, nope, we're closing it down until we all go through Alpha. We are all going to get to know Jesus together. And I mean, think about that. It sounds like a strategic decision, and it is, but the implementation of that means he has to be like, nope.
Yeah.
And then once everybody had this true common understanding of what we're doing, then we're going to build it on that. Yeah. But it's so hard to do that.
Well, in that culture in D.C., we did a total recast of the vision of the church, and we came up with these seek, serve, share. Seek him constantly, serve him faithfully, share him boldly. And then we had a paragraph for each one, then a booklet for each one, and a little class for each one, and then a 4-week class for each one. Getting there was hard.
Oh, yeah.
But once we got there, you saw the language. I'll never forget the student ministries guy called me. He says, Michael, I know we say seek him constantly, serve him faithfully, share him boldly. Would you mind if I changed it? And I'm just gritting my teeth going, oh, here it comes. And in God's kindness, I said, well, what are you thinking about? He goes, well, I'm thinking about saying, seek Jesus constantly, serve him. I said, hey, you're okay.
No. The pronoun with the capital H is much more powerful.
But the point was he owned it.
Yeah.
He owned it. And then when, unbeknownst to me, we had a building addition and somebody had very tastefully painted on the soffit, seek, serve, share.
Right.
And nobody, I didn't tell anybody to do that.
See, and And that painting was the result of it being real versus, oh gosh, when I first started in this business, I was so like mission statements.
Oh, drive me nuts. Let's talk about goals versus objectives.
Yeah, right. And so we would go into companies and go, you have to be clear. And this is not marketing.
Yeah.
I want to know, why do you exist? And they'd be like, well, we have this thing in Lucite. I said, no. Why do you? And doing it with churches was fun because I've done a lot of consulting churches because that one was easy. They were like, we got to bring people to Jesus. Yeah, okay, good. We got that one down. And then what are your values? Well, Jesus' values. Yeah. But what is the charism here and who would fit? It was the strategy part that would get them.
Okay.
But in companies, they would be like, well, we know what business we're in. And I'm like, yeah, but why should people even care? And they were like, I don't know. And it's like, it's not to make money. And they would go back and look at, why does this matter? Like, what's the real compelling reason? And then what are your values? And, it was always like, well, being kind. And it's like, no. What are the 2 or 3 things that make you different than other people? And that will drive some people crazy. Once you get all that set, then it becomes part of the fabric of how things get done. And people use it in their vocabulary and they're talking about it. But I hate when they led with painting the wall.
Yeah.
Seek, serve, share. What should we do? I know we should paint it on the wall. It's like
later.
Yeah.
Let's talk about faith in the workplace, and let's think about it from you obviously.
It doesn't belong there.
Let me finish the question before you eviscerate me. If you're a person of strong faith and convictions, and people you're working with are not, or vice versa, you often have a very competent person who is not interested in faith. Every one of your books, I think, that I own, you have a dedication to the Lord Jesus Christ.
I do. And you know something else? Every character in the fiction goes to church. And it's mentioned.
Yep.
And usually there's some application of what they've learned, like in the Working Genius book, where they figure out Working Genius. Well, the guy who figures it out, he gets home and his wife goes, hey, I volunteered you for this committee at church. He's like, oh, man. And he goes there and we see him applying it to this priest and these other people and these other, and it's because I want people to see that is part of life. And this whole sense of like, that's not who we are is crazy. Now, but we work in environments where there aren't other people like that.
That's
and you said something before, and I'm a simple man, and I don't say that like in a humble way. I mean, I am a simple guy, and my books are simple. I've come to the conclusion, because I've seen all these things about how do we disciple and how do we evangelize, and people are like, well, I don't think I do that. And recently I've told people in churches and everywhere else, you know what you can do? Just do this. When you meet people, say to them, and do it at work. Do it everywhere. Hey, is there anything going on in your life right now I could pray for? I have never had anybody say anything remotely negative.
I use that in the hospital pre-surgery when I go see someone and they come in and they're going to, typically they let pastors hang around when they're putting IVs and stuff in, because you're not unaccustomed to this.
Yeah.
And invariably when they come in to take them out, I say, hey, can I pray with y'all for just a second for you? And they've never said no.
Right.
And I had one woman one time, one doctor, she was an infant ophthalmologist for infants. And after the other guy and I prayed, she opened her eyes and she's weeping. And she said, oh, if all my patients would pray for me the way you just did. So anyway, I'm sorry I interrupted.
No, and it's so, and this is where people go, well, I don't think I'm an evangelist. I'm just, and I hate when people misquote St. Francis of Assisi. Always preach the gospel and occasionally use words. He didn't say it.
It's a bad quote.
I hate that. And so what I say to people is, okay, I've never had anybody else tell me I couldn't do this. And so I'll be in a car with somebody like an Uber driver. And let me tell you, I'm sitting there going, I'm so tired. I really don't want to talk to them. Hey, is there anything going on that I could pray for? And it always surprises me. Like, wow. And sometimes they think the worst thing anybody's ever said is, I don't think so.
Not really, yeah.
And it's like, all right. And so how about if we all just did that? And then do it. I always do it right away.
Oh, yeah, so you don't make a liar out of yourself yet.
And the other thing is, occasionally, you'll feel the Holy Spirit say, let's pray right now. And you don't have to do that. But you can tell that person, it's like, hey, and then you do it. And they're just like.
I've got a great friend.
I have goosebumps just thinking about the times you do that.
One of my longest term friends, Pat, and we talk on the phone 2-3 times a week. And I'll mention something going on, and he won't even stop. He'll just go, Father, I'm going to pray for Michael right now, and da-da-da-da-da. And, I've known him for 40 years, and so that affects me.
Oh.
And so I do that to people. And I had a friend a while back say, Michael, I appreciate when you pray for me, but give me a little heads up.
Oh, okay. I have to make my wife and my kids watch this. They get so frustrated at me because we're going to eat, and I have 4 boys. Now they're all out of the house now mostly, but they come by, and when we sit down to eat, I start praying right away because I know they want to eat, and they're always like, somebody's over here, and they're like, can you just wait? And I'm like, yeah, but he's gonna start eating, and you're over there. So this is the funny. I just dive right in, and they're always like, you're driving us crazy.
This gets to more specificity about leadership function and maybe individual, I hate the word positioning, but where is that, I call it a fulcrum in life and leadership and vision, Pat, where something hard, maybe a decision you're working on, it's been hard, but you've come to the realization, you've done your homework, you've done your studies, whatever, and you got to pull the trigger, but there's enough resistance where you know this could go very badly. Maybe I should back off. Wait, we've worked too long, too hard. We got to press forward. Where's that fulcrum in leadership as a Christian, as a godly person, as someone that cares in the right way? How do you know when to push forward and say, no, we're doing this, or will you say, I need to take a pause?
Well, I wish I had a good answer for you, but I will say this. I have learned in spiritual direction and other things that if you purify your intentions in that moment, because sometimes it can be like, I'm afraid that if we don't get there, I'll look like a failure. Or I'm frustrated and I want to just get these people to this point. And if we can just purify our intentions, which is another way of saying just take it to God. But in that moment, it's like, okay, let me get rid of any other things other than the truth of what might be best here. It puts us in a position to make a good decision. I do say we should pray about all those things, but there's moments where you have that moment to make it. Hey, everybody, let me pray about this.
Well, even with a great team, you're going to have differences of opinions, and that was another Druckerism, right? Because most people complain because they weren't asked beforehand before the decision was made, right? I mean, and there's, I had a brilliant ex-so pastor in one church, and we revised our Constitution, a statement of faith that was 30-some years old. That's no small deal.
No.
And he was brilliant. He got the 2 most contrarian elders on his team. So all the fighting happened before it was ever presented to the board incrementally over a period of time. It was genius.
Yeah.
But even in that situation, when you have a lot of investment people who love the thing, it's not like they're just being antagonistic. But there's that sense where it comes down to somebody's got to pull the trigger.
Yeah, and you know what's interesting? And that is what a leader does. They break the tie. What I talk about in conflict is that everybody on an executive team needs to weigh in order to buy in, but they don't vote. And so I need to make a decision. I'm the lead pastor. I'm the CEO. I'm the head of the team. At the end of the day, I have to own this decision, but I need to ask people for their input. But it's not a democracy. And then here's the key. And then you have to make a decision and you have to go with it. I know there's this book of spiritual direction, Father Jacques Philippe. It's one of the best books. Jacques Philippe is still alive. He's this older French priest. And when I read his books, I think, oh, this must come from the 12th century. And it's like, he's still around. And it's a book about peace and how to make peace and make decisions, do things. And he says, when you don't know what God wants, just do the very best thing that you think it is. Like you just say, God, please show me. And you don't know the answer. Just decide. And then after you decide, though, be vulnerable enough to, if it doesn't work out, go,
change.
Hey, I think I made a mistake.
Make a mistake. Howard Hendricks tells this great story about Donald Gray Barnhouse, and they would, in Philly, you went everywhere in trains, and there were no computers, so you had cases with books, your luggage. Pastor, you take your library with you on the road. And he was going with Barnhouse to speak somewhere, and he was reading a newspaper, which he often did as like his daily commentary, and then he would study his Bible. And there was a young man on the train, and he recognized Barnhouse, big celebrity in those days, and he starts to get up, and he sits back down, and he starts to get up and sits back down, and he starts to get up, and he sits back down, and Barnhouse goes, "Young man, make up your mind about something and do it in life." But that decision fulcrum, and I think of the times when sometimes it was the right thing to do, sometimes it wasn't the best thing to do, but you can't do nothing.
Well, and this is so I learned this early in my career before I started my company. Is that A decision is better than no decision because you learn from it.
Yeah.
And the world is full of people that are so afraid of making a mistake that they wait and they do more analysis and more meetings and more conversation. And this came from the military. They said, if you're sitting there on the battlefield and you don't know what to do, a good leader will say, we're taking that hill. And they go, how do you know? It's like, I don't know, but staying here
is not the right thing.
And if we start to take that hill, we're going to learn if that's the right decision. We can change.
We can option, yep.
And Patton once said, a good plan violently executed, now it's war, is better than a perfect plan executed too late.
Yeah.
And so that is true. And the other thing is, if we're vulnerable enough to go, hey, God, if I make a mistake, you'll still love me. And I could admit to these people, and it's not the end of me, and my identity is not in this decision or what people think of me, then you can do those things. But it's so many leaders, and I've been there, and I am there sometimes. Even today, I will tell you this. I was driving over here, and I was late. And something happened, and it was my fault. And I was driving over here talking to my wife on the phone. And I said, I feel so bad that I'm late. I'm really attacking myself. And she said, you're loved. And yeah, you made a mistake, but you're still loved. And I'm like, oh, I don't think so. But okay, I'll go with that. But that's the thing. We are a fear of saying I was wrong makes us do things that are sure we're not going to do the right thing. Anyway. Okay,
last sort of concept question. We've not talked about this before, but in my age group, I look at decades. Mm-hmm. I look at 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s. I'm 68 now, getting close to 70. And your purpose in life changes in a lot of ways. And you and I know a lot of people that are retired and retiring, and there seems to be the activity group, the travel, the golf, the go, the do. And I think part of our Western dream mindset, that's okay. It's fine. Grandkids. There's also the give back or do something else category. And we have a mutual friend, Dave, who says giving back is nonsense. If you stay at your highest earning years and give money to help, but to get involved in XYZ to give back may not be the best thing. And that's not evaluative every time, but you see the point.
Yes.
And as I've left the church world after 45 years, it's been a fascinating couple of years trying to figure out what's my purpose in life. Your sphere of influence changes. Some of the guys we hang out with on a regular basis, they're asking this question, Pat.
Yeah.
What do I do? What's my purpose in life? Help us out.
Oh, I have a very specific thing.
Finally, I'm glad.
5 years ago, by the grace of God, I came up with a theory for myself. And it's about what gave me joy and energy and why I came alive at work sometimes and why I was drained. And I didn't know why. And somebody said, why do you get like that? And I said, I don't know. And literally, I'm quite certain. I mean, every good gift comes from God. But this one he made very clear. He said, this is because I kind of blacked out and was on the whiteboard. And I came up with this thing called the 6 types of working genius. And what that means is in any kind of work, and I don't care if it's starting a new ministry, rebuilding your house, creating a new company, or planning, having a dinner party. There are 6 kinds of work that go into that. And they're all necessary, and only 2 of those 6 kinds are our own personal genius. And a genius is the gift God gave us that gives us joy and energy doing it. We could work in our genius for hours and hours and come home and like, did you do anything today? I worked all day and I'm so excited. You can spend 2 hours doing what we call your working frustrations. They're the 2 of the 6 that immediately drain us of joy and energy. And everybody needs to understand what those are, because there are people in the world who think they're failing because they're doing. And I had pastors call up after we came up with this and said, until I took your assessment, I thought I was a fraud. I said, why? And he goes, because I've been a pastor my whole life and I can't write a sermon to save my life.
That's systemic.
Yes.
I would say in my peer, same thing. My best pastor friend just finished his interim, helping out a local church up there where he lives. And I said, Dave, we've been doing this for over 40 years. Why is it just mind-numbing to write a sermon? We know it, we know how to do it, but it's just this, And
in this case, the guy said, and I have friends, and he had friends who could go for a walk in the woods and come up with a sermon.
Yeah, I hate those people.
And then I said, So tell me about you. And he goes, well, I love to counsel, and I love to be with people in grief, and I love to help people in their moments of need. And I said, you know those guys that write the sermons really easily? And I've met them. They're like, I don't like doing that.
No.
And they feel guilty, like, well, I'm a fraud as a pastor.
Fair.
And the evil one wants all of us to feel like we're
Fair.
not enough. And you know something?
That's the bottom line, I think.
None of us are enough.
Yeah.
But when you discover the gifts God gave you, and this is what I say to people getting older, it's like retirement age should... Now, there are some people whose personality says, I can get up and go golfing and boating every day, and that's enough. I'm not one. I don't know very many people that really are fulfilled in that. But what I say is, come to understand the kind of work, and I don't mean like what field, but the kind of activity in work that you love, and go do that, and you'll be retired. You'll be joyfully retired for the rest of your life. My dad, when he left the workplace after years and years, his working geniuses were enablement and tenacity. He liked helping people and finishing things. It's the most practical. And I'm on the other end of the scale. I like up here in the clouds. He should have just gone and gotten responsibility anywhere, and he would have been really fulfilled. He should have said, I'm going to run this store, or I'm going to organize this thing. And every day he'd have got up and said, this is what I'm supposed to do. But after all those years of work, he thought, I'm supposed to stay home and do nothing. And then it's TV and the computer, and it was just sad.
It's miserable.
And I didn't know a working genius then, but I'd have said, Dad, you're retired. Go take over this store and be the manager.
Howard Hendricks said, retire to your gifting.
Exactly. But if you don't know what your gifting is...
Well, that's the problem.
And I really believe, by the grace of God, this working genius, and because I love Myers-Briggs and I love all these other things, but I've never seen one that people immediately read. It takes 12 minutes to fill it out, and they look at the report and they go, yes, this is me. And I don't even just think people should, and in a church, what we find is people are all on staff, and they do this, and they're going, well, you don't like doing that kind of work, do you? But you have to do it in your ministry. And they're like, no, I hate it. And I go, I love that.
Yeah.
Your trash is my treasure. Could we slightly reorganize this?
But again, that takes a pretty healthy organization to be aware of that. And you know as well as I do, they're islands, they're not vulnerable, they're self-sufficient, even though they're inadequate. So for me to say, I really hate doing this, would you help me here? And when I was doing my dissertation, I could read books, I can write, I can do all that kind of stuff, but I had to do this measuring stuff. ANOVA curves and all this kind of stuff. And I actually went to the graduate school and I said, I can't learn. And the guy said, well, go take a course in statistics. I said, I took one in college. That's why I left the business major and went elsewhere, because I hated statistics. And he says, well, you can hire a graduate student to do it for you. And I went, really?
Praise God.
So I go back to my church.
That doesn't lessen you.
I go back to my church, and there's a guy who taught statistics at the Air Force Academy. One of the other executive pastors was a former nuclear submarine captain who had calculus doodles in the margins of his books. And I said, would you guys be willing to help me? And they're like, willing?
Oh,
exactly. And
what a gift.
But to admit that,
yes,
I can't do this, I need help. But again, even that, and I'm probably late 30s before I did that, Pat, maybe even 40. So it's great to talk about that, but how many guys can really implement that?
The key, and this is the key, when you put language around it and a little bit of structure, like when you take the assessment, it gives you permission to go, and you show it to people you work with, and they go, oh, so it says you probably suck at this. You're like, I now have permission.
You think? Yeah.
But people don't want to go up and go, you suck at that. But then you go, hey, look at this. And they're like, oh, no wonder you're bad at that. And I was talking to my wife about this, and I was like, well, you suck at finishing things. And she's like, I don't like you when you say I suck at it. And I go, no, let's celebrate that. And she finally, I'm not putting you down. I'm actually saying I love you how you are. Let's not pretend that you're good at this. But, there's like, no, but I have to be good at it. No, you don't. And so I think a little language and a little structure allows a person to be more vulnerable and go, yeah, there it is right there. Now, there are people that are like, we've had people go, I'm good at all six. And we're like, actually, you have a different issue. One that this isn't going to solve.
You think. We could do this all day.
Oh, my gosh. And I was just thinking as we were talking that people will say, oh, there's good guests on shows. But there's different levels. And like, I can be a really good guest or not, depending on the passion and the curiosity and the way the questions. So this is a party for me.
Exactly.
And so I might look like a good guest, but it's actually a good questioner and a good interviewer.
Takes both.
Well, they go together.
We've both had bad guests.
Yeah, but this has been a party. And I'm sorry I was late.
You're absolved.
You're
okay.
Absolved. Thank you. Thank you.
Back to your Catholic days. You're absolved.
There you go.
Well, thanks for watching the program. And as always, information in the show notes. You really don't need it because just put Pat Lencioni in your search engine and you'll find his books. Check them out. It'll be beneficial to you. Thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you. God bless you.